go over attribution theory and self-fulfilling prophecy. So what I want you to think about is, what do you normally attribute to your performance? Think back to prior classes that you've taken, maybe sporting events. When things don't go your way, what do you normally attribute to that performance? When things go your way, what are you reflecting on? What are you talking about? How are you explaining your performance to others? How are you explaining your performance to yourself? That's what we're talking about with attribution theory. So just to connect back to the first half of the semester, we're using Bloom's taxonomy right now to represent long-term memory. We broke the class up into explicit knowledge versus implicit knowledge. First half of the class really focused on explicit knowledge and the assistance of the implicit, mainly with procedural knowledge. So process, doing hands-on activities to enhance the explicit, to give the explicit knowledge something to be applied to. Now we're looking at implicit, but more in terms of the affective domain. That role of behavior, motivation, emotion, how do those all factor in? And even conditioning, forming habits of involuntary behaviors versus voluntary behaviors. How do all those tie in, and where do they fit in to what we've talked about in the structure of the class? We're over here in the affective domain. We're talking about behavior and motivation. So let's go into Warner's attribution theory. This is a model that I like because it brings in locus of control, something that can have a dramatic impact on your performance in college as well as in life. So I'll give you an example of how I used it, or how I was aware of it, and how it changed my habits and helped me out. But first, let's look at it. So internal locus of control, what does that really mean? Let's give a common sense definition so it's easy for the average person to think about. Internal locus of control means you feel like you're in control of your destiny. External locus of control, you feel like others are in control of your destiny. So if somebody were to ask you, why did you do a certain thing? Oh, well, this was just a super difficult task. That's the reason I failed. That would be external locus of control, creating excuses. Or, on the other side, maybe you did well and somebody's like, how did you do that? And you're like, oh, I have a natural ability for this, or I put forth a lot of effort, or both. That would be more internal locus of control. Now, let's look at each one. Let's go here to ability. That's internal locus of control. You feel like you're in control of your destiny. Your natural ability at a subject, maybe math or English or what have you, maybe it's a sport, is a fairly stable trait, meaning it's not going to fluctuate a lot. It will change over time, but not like something that's unstable. So internal locus of control, feel like you're in control of your destiny. Now let's look at effort. It's very unstable. Motivation has a huge impact on effort, on the amount of effort we're going to put into something. So we'll get to the different types of motivation, but right now, let's just think in general terms. Very unstable trait. Some days you wake up, you don't feel like going to class, you've been doing well in the course, but some days you just don't want to put forth the effort. Same thing if you play sports. Some days, most days you practice really hard because you're naturally driven. You have a natural ability for it, but sometimes you just don't feel great. So that's why we classify that as unstable. Now let's go to the other side. And this is something you got to be careful of. It's something that I fell into when I was younger, but eventually being made aware of locus of control over time, I changed the way I think about tasks, especially difficult tasks. So that is a fairly stable trait. It's not going to change very much, meaning just the task itself. So if you come to my class and I have a difficult test or a difficult assessment or a difficult project for you, that's not going to change. Right? That is set in stone. I have to treat all students fairly. So there's not a lot you can do. You don't have a lot of control over that. And then luck. If you're relying on luck, sometimes you get lucky, right? But it is very unstable. You cannot rely on that. It is going to fluctuate because it's just by chance, just by probability that you're getting lucky. Eventually, your luck will run out. So that's why we classify that as unstable, and that's how you can use it. Now, let's look at a real life example that happened to me. In junior high, all the way up until junior high, I was decent at math, and for some reason, I just decided one day, I think 8th grade, that I was terrible at math. Maybe, I don't know where it came from. I was just being lazy. Didn't want to put a lot of effort into it. So I started saying, I'm just not very good at it. And that wasn't necessarily the case. I was just creating that excuse, saying that I didn't have a natural ability because, yeah, it was difficult, but I just didn't want to put forth the effort. So all through high school, I took the easiest, once I got out of junior high, got into high school, I started taking the easiest math classes I could. I wasn't planning on going to college, so I took consumer math, fundamentals of math, and pre-algebra. You can't do that anymore, but in my age group, you could, right? So that's all I took. Well, I get out into the real world at age 18, have to get out. And not that I didn't have a job in high school, but I started having to work, support my child at age 18, and worked for about 5 years. And when she got old enough to go into daycare, then I was able to go back to college. And I still had that mindset that I was terrible at math, but I ended my high school career with pre-algebra. Right? And there's a difference between not having a natural ability for math and not putting forth the effort. I had the ability, I just had never put forth the effort. So I was uneducated. That's a better way to phrase it. It wasn't that I wasn't capable of learning it. I was just uneducated. In fact, I had all the skills for math. I just didn't know it. I was really good at procedural tasks. Anything that was a process, I could do. So the order of operations, super easy. Something you're going to use all the way through math. Being able to think in abstract thoughts and visualize information, I had that. So I had to take all the developmental courses. I had to take Algebra 1, Algebra 2, and that got me to college algebra. And then once I got to college algebra, because my professor not only taught developmental, but he also taught college level math, he knew what I needed. And he was a great teacher. And then I became really interested in math. Started putting forth more effort. Found out I have a natural ability for math. So I ended up taking, after the developmental courses, college algebra, trigonometry for my associates. Then I had to have a stats course for my bachelor's degree. Then I had to have 2 more stat courses for my master's degree. Then I had to have 5 stat courses for my PhD. And I excelled in all of them. And it was because I had that ability. But early on, I had made excuses. I started blaming task difficulty. Oh, that teacher hates me. Or I'm terrible at math. It's just too difficult for me. I started going external locus of control, feeling like others were in control of my destiny. But when I took an internal locus of control and started focusing on my natural ability and putting forth more effort, I excelled. So that's what I want you to do. Stop making excuses and truly explore the subjects that are difficult for you and find out. Don't blame it on external forces. Find out if you have a natural ability for it. And if not, then offset that by putting forth more effort. All right, so that is attribution theory. That's how you can apply it to your learning. It's one of my favorite models. Now let's go into self-fulfilling prophecy and different biases that you're going to encounter or you're going to exhibit. And I have fallen into all of these. Well, let's go back to that math example. I created a self-fulfilling prophecy. And I was looking for confirmation. I was falling into confirmation bias. I started saying, man, math is difficult. So therefore, I didn't even put forth the effort. I created a self-fulfilling prophecy. Oh, that teacher hates me. Things that were external when I could have focused on internal. Again, created a self-fulfilling prophecy. But by making those excuses, I didn't even put forth the effort. Had I put forth the effort, I would have found out I had a natural ability. No matter if I had a difficult teacher or a difficult subject, I could have gotten through it in math. So I created a self-fulfilling prophecy. And I was looking for confirmation bias. If I got a test back that had a bad grade, see, I told you that teacher hates me. Or, see, I told you I was terrible at math. Confirmation bias. I was looking for evidence to support my claims. Self-serving bias. Now, I've fallen into this as well. If you succeeded, you started bragging about your natural ability. I'm just great at this, right? And let's look at sports. Pulled something off, did really good, performed very well. That's self-serving bias. If you succeed, you start going internal on yourself. Start explaining your success based on internal characteristics. Oh man, I'm just really good at this. Now let's go back to that math example. If I failed, you tend to go external with self-serving bias. Oh, I had a terrible teacher. They were just so bad at teaching math. Or that teacher just hates me. Or that test was just way too hard. Nobody'd be able to pass that. That's self-serving bias. If you succeed, you go internal. If you fail, you go external. Now, here's the last one, fundamental attribution error. I, as a teacher, have to be very careful about this. You, as a group member, need to be careful with this as well. If other people fail, we tend to go internal as opposed to external with self-serving bias. With fundamental attribution error, we go internal on somebody else. Oh, they're just lazy. They're just no good at that subject. That's why they failed. We ignore the external factors that could have played in. So as a teacher, like if somebody continually shows up late, I've fallen into this. Oh, that's a lazy person. They're just terrible at time management. Not taking in consideration of other external factors. Maybe that student had a child. They had to get to daycare. Maybe the daycare didn't open up at a certain period of time. Maybe the bus was running late and they're relying on another way of getting their child to school. Maybe they had a flat tire that day. There are other extraneous variables that as a teacher I have to kind of think about. Now, if it's continuous and repetitive, that is a problem the student needs to solve, but it could be due to other external variables. So that's fundamental attribution error. When you're making judgments of others, be real careful that you don't internalize that on them. Not on yourself, but you don't go internal when you describe their performance. You need to consider other options. So you need to ask questions of that person. Like I need to ask those students, well, hey, what's going on? Let's sit down here. I notice you're coming in late all the time, or you're not performing well on this task. What is actually happening? Are you studying? Things getting in the way? Try to investigate and find out what's going on. Same thing with your group members. When you're doing group work, don't go internal on them if they're not performing well at first, right? Investigate. And maybe in the process of investigation, there is something they can't really necessarily control. Maybe not. Maybe it is something where they're not putting forth the effort. It could very well be that they are the issue, but you need to investigate first. Don't jump to conclusions. Don't fall into confirmation bias where you start looking for evidence to support your claims that this is something internally wrong with somebody. There could be other external variables. So all of these kind of work together. And you can see, I'm sure if you went through, you could connect that to where you've fallen into this yourself. Confirmation bias, self-fulfilling prophecy, the biggest one is these two go hand in hand. You start looking for evidence. That evidence starts supporting your claims regardless if it's true or not, and you can create a self-fulfilling prophecy that gets you in trouble. Here are some references and some other additional variables that can come into play if you want more information about the subject.